In this video, we're going to be going over how gems are going to work in New World Season 4. Whenever the PTR patch notes released, there was a very big section in there about gems and how the functionality of gems are going to be changing moving forward. I've seen quite a lot of confusion going around about how that's actually going to be working. So in this video, we're going to explain exactly how that's going to work. I'm going to go through the patch notes very quickly and then show you guys some examples of some testing that I've performed on the PTR. So first, we're going to take a look at the PTR patch notes very quickly, just in case some of you guys have no idea what I'm talking about and you didn't know there were even gem changes coming. So the big changes are going to be down here at the bottom right here in this section. But first, we're going to go over some of the other changes that were mentioned as well. So they made some of the following changes to all of the associated rune glass gems. Their value should match the value of the tier 4 version of each. So brash or an onyx gem, they reduced the health requirement from 100% to 70% and reduced effects from a range of 15% to 30% to a range of 9 to 18, since it's going to have a higher uptime. The opportunist or the emerald, they increased the target health requirement from below 30 to below 50. They reduced the effects from a range of 15 to 30 to a range of 7 to 16, since it's going to have a higher uptime. And they also added 1% to 5% bonus healing on targets below 50% health. So I think their overall goal here is just to get people using more gems than what's used now. There's only a few gems in the game that are getting utilized, so I think that's what these changes are trying to address. And then with the Moonstone, they reworked the bonus damage while all abilities are on cooldown and updated values to be 11 to 20%. And then for the Jasper, they updated functionality to be after blocking or taking a hit. They increased duration to 5 seconds, allowed it to stack up to 3 times, and reduced individual stack values from a range of 6% to 20% to a range of 3% to 8%. And then for the Opal, this is by far the most used gem. So they reduced damage values from a range of 6% to 15 to 4 to 12% while your stamina is not full. So there's a little bit of a nerf coming into the Opal. And then for the Carnelian, they added a new functionality that increases the damage by 0.5 to 2% to taunted foes per gem slotted. And then finally, we have a change to the Sapphire. They updated scaling off int to scaling off of focus. Now, this one is very important because of the next section that we're going to talk about. This is really the section that I wanted to make the video for, the conversion gem balance. This is the part that a lot of people are confused about, so we're going to clear that up here in this video. So they updated the functionality and values of all the conversion gems. Conversion gems will now consistently convert 50% of the weapon damage to the element associated with the gem, regardless of the tier. So if you're unaware right now on live, the way this works is whenever you get something like a cut flawed amber, it converts 20% of the damage dealt. And then like a cut version is 30, the brilliant version is 40, and then the pristine version is 50. So now conversion gems, regardless of their tier, are going to convert 50% of the weapon damage to the element associated with the gem, but will now scale all of the weapons damage to int focus if those attributes are higher than the base weapons attributes. So what this particular section means is that now you are going to be able to take something like a great axe, for example, slot a ruby into that great axe, and then scale it off of intelligence based on a sliding factor. So if that's still a little bit confusing, don't worry, we're going to get into it and you guys will understand how this works by the end of the video. So conversion gem values. For reference, single attribute scaling is 100%, primary scaling is 90%, secondary scaling is 65%, and dual scaling is 80%. So for those of you that are new to the game or may not understand this section, basically all this means is that there are single attribute scaling weapons like the Great Axe, the Warhammer, those scale 100% off of strength. Your primary scaling is 90%, so something like a longsword is 90% strength, 65% dex, that'd be the secondary scaling. And then dual scaling is the great sword in the game, which is 80% and 80%. I think it's actually 81-80, but it's just 80% dex, 80% strength. Then if we take a look at each of the tiers of gems here, we have first the tier 2, 50% conversion to element at 60% scaling off of int and 50% scaling off of focus. So what this ultimately means is that you're going to convert 50% of your damage dealt to that element type, whatever element you are slotting. And if you put your intelligence above the base weapon's attributes, then your weapon itself is going to scale damage off of intelligence, but it's only going to scale at a 60% rate. So we're going to show you some examples here in just a moment. And then tier 3 is the same thing, but it's 70% scaling off of int and 60% scaling off of focus. Tier 4 is 80% scaling off of int, 70% scaling off of focus. Tier 5 is 90% scaling off of int and 80% scaling off of focus. And then the rune glass variants scale at the same level as the tier 4 gem. So if you slot a rune glass, you're going to get 80% scaling off of int and 70% scaling off of focus. And it says down here at the bottom, note, these will not dual scale. If the replacement attribute is higher, it will override the base weapon scaling. So what this means is if you are using something like the hatchet that is a dual scale weapon that scales off of strength and off of dex, if you're using the hatchet, typically you're going to put some points into strength and into dex to be able to utilize the full damage capability of that weapon. Well, now what will happen is that it's only going to scale off of intelligence if intelligence is higher. So if you slot a ruby gem into your hatchet, for example, you are then going to get 90% scaling on intelligence and only on intelligence. So now let's jump over here to the PTR. I'm going to show you guys some examples so you can see exactly how these gems are going to work in action. And by the end of this, you're going to fully understand exactly how they work. So for this particular test, we went naked, no armor, no food buffs. We used a gear score 700 weapon that had 32 attribute points on it, but those were constitution. So constitution is not going to affect our damage output. We are not taking into consideration any crit damage, and we're not allocating any skills to the weapon. That way we can just get base damage on the weapon that we were doing itself so we can see the differences in damage. So we're going to start off by testing some damage out of the great axe. We put 225 points into strength. This meant that our light attack damage did 2,048 damage with 0 elemental damage because we don't have a gem slotted in the great axe at this time. We then tried a heavy attack. We did 3,399 damage. So now that I have some base stats to work with, we then shifted the attribute points from strength to intelligence. So now I have 225 intelligence and then slotted a ruby gem into the great axe. So what this does now is that the great axe itself now scales off of intelligence at a 90% rate. So we're not getting a full 100% damage out of the great axe, but we are scaling it at 90%. We can see that here with these numbers. So whenever we do a light attack, we get 861 light attack damage, 1,041 elemental damage for a total damage amount of 1,902. So I would like to point out here as well, you would expect to see that at a 50-50 split. So you'd expect to see something like 861 light attack damage, 861 elemental damage for a total damage output of whatever that would be. Because whenever we read the patch notes, it says it is an even 50-50 split. The reason you do not have a 50-50 split there and the elemental damage is 1,041 is because there are attribute bonuses with intelligence that allows you to do plus 15% to elemental damage. That is at the 150 intelligence mark. So you would expect for that elemental damage to be a little bit higher. So just wanted to point that out in case you were wondering why that wasn't an even 50-50 split. If we were to take out all of our attributes and had nothing going on, it is a 50-50 split. Or if you spec into something like Dex that doesn't have any kind of bonuses in that regard, it is a clean 50-50 split. So now let's take a look at the total damage we dealt in relation to the damage we did without a gem in there. So we did 1,902 total light attack damage, and before without a gem and specking into strength, we did 2,048. So what that means is that we did a total of 92.87% of that damage whenever we spec'd into intelligence. So we only lost out on a little over 7% damage, which is quite a lot, but bear in mind that weapon now scales off of intelligence. So now you could essentially play something like the Great Axe or the Fire Staff or the Great Axe and the Ice Gauntlet and scale both of those weapons off of intelligence and get some decent damage output out of there. This is going to open up builds by a whole lot. I think theory crafting for builds and the diversity of builds can be opened up a lot with this new implementation of gems, which is pretty exciting to see. And as you can see here, we did test it with heavy attacks and came out with a pretty similar result. Again, the percentages are a little bit off. You're not getting a 50-50 split, and it's not a clean 90%, it's 89.5. That's just because of the attribute bonuses that you get from speccing into intelligence. And then just for reference, I tried the Great Axe with strength with the ruby slotted in there, and we did 1,024 light attack damage with 948 elemental damage for a total of 1,972 damage. So you can see there, that is more than just speccing into just intelligence, which you would expect to see, because now you're getting 100% scaling on the Great Axe versus 90%, but it is less than the total damage you get from no gem at all. This is because some of the strength passives enhance your physical damage. So that's why you see the elemental damage being a little bit less and your light attack damage being more in this situation. So after I tested intelligence, I then wanted to see how this worked with focus, and what we would expect to see is about an 80% conversion because that's what the patch notes said. So of course I have the same base light attack damage and heavy attack damage at 2,048 light attack damage with no gem slotted and 225 strength, 3,399 heavy attack damage, again with no gem slotted and 225 strength. Then we slotted a Sapphire. And remember, the Sapphire now is a focus gem and no longer an intelligence gem whenever season 4 lands. And then along with the Sapphire, we of course shifted our attributes from strength into focus. So now we have 225 focus. So our light attack damage dealt 812, and then our elemental damage was 812. So you can see here we get a clean 50-50 split because there are no attribute point bonuses that are affecting any damage in this situation whenever you spec into focus. So we can see we did 1,624 total light attack damage compared to 2,048. That is 79.30% of the damage, so almost right on the money of 80% conversion. And then the heavy attack damage, very similar. And now the reason those are not exactly 80% across the board for 80% conversion is because whenever you're looking at strength, you do get some bonuses to your light and heavy attack damage throughout the attribute bonuses. But the overall premise is the same. This does work exactly how it reads to work on the patch notes. So hopefully this cleared some of the confusion up for you guys. It's a pretty interesting take on gems, because now what we can do is you could slot a great axe, throw a sapphire gem in there, scale it off of focus, and then put a life staff on your back bar, and you can still heal for quite a lot because you're spec'd into focus, and you're still going to be dealing 80% of the damage that you would have been dealing otherwise. So you can make some pretty creative builds with this new gem conversion. One of the things I would like to point out, though, is that that seems very strong and seems like you would just want to slot a life staff on your back bar regardless of what you're running, just scale everything off of focus. But you have to remember, in that situation, you're losing out on a whole lot of damage attribute bonuses whenever you don't go strength or dex or intelligence or your primary attribute. There are some trade-offs there for sure, especially with focus, because you also are only scaling at 80%. So you're losing the 20% damage, and then you're also going to lose some damage from those attribute bonuses. So just keep that in mind. But still, nonetheless, I think there's going to be a lot of builds that this opens up, which is pretty interesting. And then I tested one other thing that I wanted to show you guys, and that is testing the Great Axe with a Rune Glass Ruby gem. So as we know, you're going to get a little bit of damage drop off from reading the patch notes. It doesn't scale at 90% off of intelligence. It now scales off of 80 if you utilize a Rune Glass gem. This is because you also get some damage over time effects with a lot of the Rune Glass gems, which is what most people are going to slot in their weapon. And then you have a 70% scaling with focus. So whenever I put the Rune Glass gem on, these were the results. We got 2,048 light attack damage from the Great Axe, and then I did 812 light attack damage, 981 elemental damage. That is higher because we get the additional 15% elemental damage from the intelligence tree. And then we did 249 dot damage, which put us at a total of 2,042 damage off of the light attack. So that's pretty crazy because that is 99.71% of the damage we were doing with no gem slotted on the Great Axe at all. So if you slot a Rune Glass that does the damage over time effect, you're essentially doing as much damage as you would every light attack from that weapon by scaling it off of intelligence and slotting an intelligence gem into the weapon. But it does start to fall off in other situations, like heavy attacks, for example. Those are only going to do about 92% of the damage. So a lot of things to take into consideration there, but Rune Glass gems may be the way to go for some of this conversion scaling with the gems, because you're still going to do quite a lot from your light attack, so it seems. And then of course there's some other attributes and some other things that are going to play into that. But it will be incredibly fun, I think, to go theory craft some of this stuff and to go build some of the builds out. But hopefully this explains to you guys exactly how this worked. In a nutshell, whenever you slot an intelligence or a focus gem into any weapon in the game, it is then going to scale off of intelligence or focus as long as you are putting points into those attributes. That's going to do it for this one, boys and girls. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. I hope that cleared some of the confusion up for you guys about gems. I have seen that question asked a whole lot, and I've seen a lot of confusion still floating around about it. But please remember, this is currently on the PTR, so anything could change before Season 4 lands. I fully expect these conversion gems to come in. It seemed pretty okay to me whenever I was testing it. I did test quite a lot of other weapons, not just the Great Axe, but that was the easiest one to show. So that's the one that I wanted to show you guys because I thought it'd be the easiest one to explain. But that's it. Thank you guys again for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you enjoy New World content, please make sure to like and subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate that as well. And of course, you can find me over on twitch.tv/BDLG every Monday and every Friday, 8 o'clock a.m. CST. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus over there recently because I was out of internet for a very extended period of time, which was awful. But we should be back in action now or very soon. But that's going to do it. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. We'll see you in the next one.